there, by the way. Okay, now I lost your picture. Now you're back. And I'm talking to, I'm a little nervous because we had some technical difficulties, didn't we, yesterday when we were trying to talk. This is Anthony McFarlane Gonzalez, a good pal, great fella, and a man of the world. 3 tours in the war zones, 2 in, was it 2 in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan? Or the other way around? Yep.
No.
2 in Afghanistan. Yeah, and 1 in Iraq. So, good Lord, Afghanistan, of course, the toughest place in the world there. Even I survived Iraq. So it can't be that tough. I was there when ISIS attacked, and there was no defense at all. A few, rockets going off like this from the airport, errant rockets. Every afternoon they had volleys, just to shoot out at the people in the desert, right? Just to, same time, every day, just to let them know they were there and they had firepower. Hilarious, right?
Yeah, especially when they're attacking poo points that are programmed by cell phones. Of course, these guys plant them and then they just call them and they send the rockets off. It's typical MO.
Yeah, that's a long time ago, my friend. 2004.
Oh, yes.
June. It's coming up, the anniversary, the 11th year.
Bloody.
Sorry, sir.
No, I was just saying bloody hell because the time flies.
I need to talk more about you because I can't say enough about you. You're a very impressive person. Special Forces operator and a radio man, and a first aid guy, a medic. So this makes you an extremely, well, perhaps the most important man in the unit. They're all important, but if you see what I mean, because you're carrying that radio, which is essential to all forward units. If you read my book, Rum, the hero of the book starts off with a prick, whatever I've forgotten the number now. That's what they called the radio. He's a radio man. And it really gives you the history of those radio guys in Vietnam and how important.
The PRC-7. Yep.
What?
The PRC.
What? PRC-7?
Yep.
Yeah, they used to call it the Prick 7. Yeah. Yep. So, anyway, so Anthony is a skilled veteran, but also a man of intellect who is a cyber security expert with NATO. And we were talking not about cybersecurity, but we were just talking in general. You were on my show for many times over the 2.5 years it was running on television in Poland in English, being a pioneer of English language programming in Poland. That's me, and you as well, but as a regular interviewee, as a regular participant, offering us lots of important, exciting, interesting, knowledgeable, inside, well, not inside, but particularly nothing secret, but the point of view of someone who's been there in different areas and knows what war looks like firsthand. And let's start there, because I think there's a lot of problems with people now who are in charge in the West who don't know what war is like firsthand, and many of them who may never have been in a fist fight. Do you know what I mean? They don't understand that violence is like that, and you have to make decisions. So, what do you think about I'm not going to ask you about the state of the government. I mean, everybody needs to make their own mind up about that. We can have opinions. But I think, what do you think about the leadership, United States leadership cooperation with European cooperation and other members of NATO right now? Because Canada's in NATO and isn't Turkey in NATO, and they're not European necessarily. European, close too.
Close, yeah. But as far as the relationships that the United States is tarnishing, I would definitely say the closest ally that it has that's part of NATO is Canada. These tariffs and these, I would just call them squabbles, petty schoolboy actions that they're doing towards an ally that's been with them since the very beginning of the
Since the end of World War II. Oh, well, even during World War II. Yeah.
Even during World War II, yes.
Yeah.
Because they were the ones that launched the offensives together on the beaches of not only Normandy, but, Normandy. I don't remember the names of the beaches, but they were there too. And on top of that, they also had another launch into a northern beach that massacred a Canadian battalion or a brigade, if I'm not mistaken. So that these guys have blood and shed blood for all the other wars throughout what we've had, let alone they're actually one of the most economically viable and promising people to us, and they really haven't done anything wrong against us since. So it's really surprising that Trump is doing this. That administration, it just needs to have a check, and they need to really see the damage that they're causing, because yes, we may be pushing the allies to search otherwise and elsewhere for advice, for advice and for industries that they're looking for, especially in the military industry, defense industry. But the thing that they're going to be doing is the United States defense industry is going to be hindered massively. You're having countries like Portugal, you're having countries like Germany reassessing their ability to even go and continue with the F-35 program. Canada has just canceled their F-35 program, which is 88 F-35s. Portugal was doing 15 to 16 F-35s, and Germany was doing 35 F-35s. So a lot of others are questioning them too. That's just one of the many things. So there's also air defense, there's also communications, there's also cyber. So there's also a lot of IT infrastructure that we're looking at. That's one of the things that the U.S. is really kicking themselves in the butt. And I hope that they are going to be able to reconcile this with the neighbors.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the relationship between the U.S. and NATO, it's not just based on military cooperation. The military cooperation was exchanged for business cooperation, corporate cooperation with American business, and also allowing Americans to have bases in every country, and to choose the locations in most cases. So there was a huge reward for the United States. It's not all been the Europeans taking, because being able to protect those avenues of trade into Europe for United States business has been a boon, and in other areas using the Navy throughout the world. It's not just that all these countries are taking advantage of the United States. I mean, we get American businessmen are not fools. They make deals that are good for them as well, don't they? Or can they not be trusted to make decent deals?
Yeah, well, that's to be debated too. As our oh man, I'm going to open up a can of worms. I really don't care. As our dodgy Doge leader, he has massive fingers and tentacles that are not very good for the U.S. government and its assets around the world. And who I'm talking about is Elon Musk, if people do not understand who the Doge leader is.
What's your gripe with Elon Musk, and how does it relate to NATO, if it does?
It does.
I could relate it to NATO, but go ahead. You go.
We could always make it relate to NATO, but the main thing is that he's going to start looking at NATO. NATO is always and will continue to ever be a deterrence. It has never been a fighting force. It has always been there as more political and a statement saying that as an alliance, you mess with one, you mess with all. Now, interesting that I bring up Elon, because he is the efficiency czar, is what I call him. But he does not understand that political systems do not mix with business very well. If you're going to run it like a business, it's going to fail. And it's because most of the people outside the United States other countries do understand emotional and do understand cultural. He doesn't, even though himself and his family are South African.
You think that being a South African should make him more aware of social concerns, but in this case doesn't appear to.
Yeah, you would think, especially since he himself and his family, what is it called, immigrated or sought asylum from the apartheid in South Africa.
What do you think? Where do you think his politics lie now? Because he was always a left of center guy for a very long time. He got a lot of support from the government in starting his businesses and going from one to the other. Where do you think his politics lie now, actually, really? And what is his end game?
His end game is control. His politics lie still on the left. He is still an extremist on the far left. So his end game is control, and he's gonna get it. And he's only wanting money and power, as you have and myself noted from him, that he wants to literally colonize Mars and create and separate himself from the world and have his own rule of the world. He has a God complex that needs to be checked really quick before it gets out of hand and puts millions, if not billions, of people in danger.
So you think he's the ultimate mad scientist? We need to write a script.
One of the major people that is of concern to this world.
You say he's left wing, so he's out. Where do you think Trump is actually?
That one I have no clue, because he is a hardball to read. He doesn't make sense with his moves that he's been making in this first term. Yes, we knew exactly where he stood, Republican. What he's making is insanity. He doesn't even fit into the left wing. He doesn't fit to the Democratic Party. He doesn't even fit the Republican. It doesn't even fit any of the parties. That's what scares the hell out of me.
He's a classic sort of, well, some people would say he's a classic Huey Long sort of populist. Huey Long being the governor of Louisiana back in the 30s, who was assassinated and who was most likely going to run for president against Roosevelt in 1940, would it have been? Or 1936? 1936. One of those two.
40, because Roosevelt was president throughout the entire war. So he was one of the longest sitting presidents in a single term, besides...
Yeah, but when was Huey Long assassinated? That's the question. 37? 6 or 7?
7, because 36 he was still alive.
I think 37, yeah. And so it would have been 40 when he might have challenged Roosevelt. And he was extremely polarizing figure, somewhat like Trump has been, although these are very different times. In the 1930s, during the Depression, was a totally different economic time. When we're too fat now, they were way too thin then. When the heroes were Bonnie and Clyde, I mean, you got a problem,
Yep. Yeah, because people wanted to believe in.
Yeah, and other gangsters. Those were the sort of heroes because they were getting even with the man. We saw some of that. We've seen some of that with this Mangione character who killed the head of United Health, which he's on trial now, right, in New York. This fellow. So some of this, there is in the burning of Teslas, there seems to be some kind of, I won't call it a groundswell, but there's certainly intense pockets of resistance, civil disobedience, and uncivil disobedience, I would say, of course.
Here, well, give me a second.
Yeah. We're talking to Anthony McFarlane Gonzalez, who's appeared many, many times on my television show. He's talking to me from his lair in deep in the Polish mid-north. He's only a stone's throw from the winding ways of the Vistula River, I think.
Yeah,
and
not too far away. The river, yeah.
ensconced, I would say. And did you go for a bike ride today?
Yep.
That's your big thing, isn't it? Bike riding. Yeah,
It's
amazing.
a good stress relief. It brings out the
Yeah, we missed
endorphins. It helps.
we missed the interview yesterday with you in your bike gear. We had you stopping on the side of the, in the forest or side of the road, and that was a good interview actually. And Skype didn't keep it.
I know. Pity.
I don't know what's going on with this stuff. They want us all to switch the other thing. I'm hoping that it's going to let us go this time. Maybe we said a word you're not supposed to say.
No, that wouldn't put it too far.
I think we did. Nobody cares. Nobody cares what I say anyway.
I'm pretty sure
I saw a lot of people raise their hands. Yeah.
Yep.
Get with it, folks. Get with it. Yeah. So coming back, you're as we know, you're a cybersecurity expert with NATO. So you are looking at dealing with media, with internet, with all kinds of communications to dealing with that. And what's that like? How is that affected by the present situation with the negotiations, Ukraine, Russia, United States?
The negotiations really haven't affected NATO. But the bigger things are when we have the NATO the NATO conference, the yearly conference. That's where they have the bigger effects. But I have seen some signs. At certain points. Yeah.
It's a wild animal. There he is.
Big wolf.
Hello. Boy, his nose looks long in the camera.
Oh yeah.
What a nut.
He's a big werewolf.
You got to call him. He should be called McTavish.
You know, that's what I might actually call the next one. Scooby. Hey. Settle down.
Scooby McTavish.
But yeah, no, I haven't seen any signs. No, there haven't been much. There has not been any activity with the current negotiations that are happening. But there are some entities that are seeing effects that it's just human error. It's kind of like how we do with certain emails that we're not supposed to open. Yeah, people are still doing that.
They're doing what exactly?
Phishing attempts.
Oh, phishing attempts. Yeah. Well, how extensive is their bot program in Russia these days? Who do they target? Pretty robust.
So they're targeting.
How does it work? How do the bots find what they're looking for? How does that work generally for a layman?
Okay, so for a layman, basically, it's radio transmissions. So there's certain radio transmissions. So for instance, the information that they're looking for, the script, the message, is being transmitted over a radio frequency. So for instance, the satellite is the modem that is connecting the servers from the ground. The modem then pushes the information to the radio tower. This is just what it can do. And then it connects to your phone. That phone is a bot. Same with that modem that was pushing the information from the servers. That entire network has so much computing power that when it is linked together, it becomes a massive amount of spamming or phishing that has computing power beyond what a normal computer that we have at home. So take it this way, it has 100 to 500 times the computing power. Computing power meaning that it takes less time for us to crack and break codes to have access to anything inside their network once we gain access. That's why it's critical to gain access to a network so it can pivot left or pivot right, depending on which way they want to go. It's just basically pivoting to gain escalate access to end state being the sysadmin. So system administrator access. That's what you want, because then you're at root. And when you're at the root, you have and can do anything you want without being discovered.
And the Russians have a huge investment in this, don't they? It is one of their best weapons. And
it is with the Chinese, because they've worked alongside with the Chinese on that one.
How does that affect the propaganda that is spouted by unknowing, perhaps even unwilling people in the United States, the brainwashing program that some people repeat, even well-known people, even some government people are repeating Russian propaganda, perhaps without knowing it, perhaps knowingly.
Who knows?
How
We
does,
don't.
Sorry?
That's the thing. How do we not?
Well,
how do we don't? I mean, but it's just, I'm talking people. The people are being manipulated by that, because some of these things that they receive could be false, and they're continuously pushing it down there, and that creates a negative impact on society and also decisions that are made in the government. So
we can also have AI now, so
oh yeah, that's not to say
very readily.
Yeah, no, but ChatGPT is not even the biggest problem. There is a ChatGPT, a large language model. That's what ChatGPT is. It's not AI true. AI has a conscience. It is able to self-think, self-protect. It doesn't have that yet. But it's a large language model which we feed information to it to actually make decisions in a timely and much faster manner than we can. But they do have a version of a large language model that is based off ChatGPT for criminal activities in the dark web. China has used it too, and it's been co-developed with threat actors from all over the world.
What is this? Okay, what is the dark web, and how does this work there? Criminal activity on the dark web. What is the dark web first?
Dark web is basically just another name for saying criminal activities with a different operating system within the internet. There you can conduct nefarious activities, fraudulent, criminal, sexual, drug-related, also espionage, both criminal and non-criminal espionage, and also conduct country-based acts against another actor or against another country. That's the dark web. It extends to every corner of the world. And if we don't think that it's happening in some of the third world countries that are really, really impoverished, we are silly to believe that, because they have really good people there that are doing that.
How does it interact with the regular internet that we're using now?
No, nothing. It interacts. It's like you gotta think of it as a subway system underneath the highway system that we ride on for the regular internet.
That's kind of how I look at it, but I'm still wondering how it intersects. How do you access it generally? Let's not give people information how to do that.
I'm not going to give them too much information, but you can access it via a Tor website, so THOR.
Right.
And that's just basically you're creating a tunnel into that, and you're accessing it. That's it.
Okay, and then you're accessing information, which is stored information, in places where you wouldn't ordinarily be able to go. So it's effectively hacking, right?
Yeah, it's the whole point that the internet is that there's many different bases to act on it. So you have net, you have .gov, you have .com, you have whatever the heck it is. But the dark web operates in a different manner, where you have Tor websites that is an underlayer, and it operates in a different layer than the regular internet.
And you need a lot more power to do this, right?
Yes, because most of the activities on the dark web are Unix based. And Unix is not what most people use Unix, but it's a different variation of Unix. So Linux
it's not
is
the hyper fast, which takes the most energy to work on, work through.
It takes a heck of a lot more energy because it's slow.
Yeah,
and it's just data. That's all it really is data. That's what people need to understand. Data.
What do people in NATO? Thanks for that. That's very interesting. People can, of course, find out more information, I suppose, by Googling that or chat GPTing it, if that's a word. That's a word. What is NATO? What is you think the feeling, the thought, the feeling and the thought in NATO right now about the relationship with the United States? Is it getting weaker, or will it remain where it is, or will it get stronger?
You want my honest answer, or do you just want?
I want your honest answer, and then we can expand.
There's a lot of worry. They're very weary of how the United States is acting. So much so that it's really affected a lot of programs, and it will continue to affect a lot of programs. People don't understand that NATO has kept a bear at bay, I should say, without being politically naming the country that I'm naming, because of the alliance. It's a deterrence. NATO will always be and has been a deterrence. It needs to be there. It's one thing that, let's go back in history. NATO was the second, or a byproduct of what the Europeans knew they needed, was a combined military effort. Ironically, the French proposed this in 1951 to 52 by having every single country in Europe backing it up, to include Germany. Also the UK by providing training, and the United States also by providing training. So it would be, in modern terms, a MTT teams. So that would be a mission essential training teams, to come over here and train the Europeans and continue to train the Europeans under a European army. It was in 1953 that it was not ratified. Everybody else signed the doctrine and ratified it, except for one country. And I will tell you why, and I will mention that country in a minute. What happened in 1953? There was another war that just ended on the far east of this world that we all call the Far East. It was the Korean War. The Korean War ended. So nations thought that was the last war. They didn't need that war. Well, obviously, they were wrong. And that nation didn't ratify it. That nation was the very one that proposed the European army. France didn't ratify it. So as of 1954, which you can see the time is very short, so that was probably within quarter four of 1953, ratification didn't take place, and it never took place. And that's why NATO became much more of what it is today. However, in recent times, what you're seeing now, it has been brought up again, and it was proposed again, but in a different manner. But before I get into that, the NATO will continue to be worried as to see what the maneuvers the United States is going to be doing, especially with this administration. But as far as getting back to the European army, they're not going to bring a European army back. No. But however, nations are going to be combining together to increase the industrial might of the European firepowers that we have here. And I mean, in every single country.
Industrial base to grow the firepower. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Yes, that is the closest that they will get right now to a combined European army. But this is going to be a combined military industrial complex that will help support and defend the European continent. That is what's being proposed at the EU as we speak right now.
With the Germans in the lead? How do the British, because they're not in the EU, how does that work?
They are in favor and support it. They don't care if they're not in the EU, they're European, and they want that. And it's ironic that you say that, because they're in NATO.
They're in NATO, but they're not in the EU. So, yeah, that's why a lot of people may not realize that.
Exactly. And they're a contributing member to the EU. They're not in the EU, they're a contributing member. So they are contributing to making decisions, but they're not they can't vote like other nations can.
Yeah, they're not the only country that's not in the active voting part of the EU. Norway is not in. Switzerland, exactly. Are they? Yeah, I don't think so. Or are
No,
they?
they're not.
Yeah.
Because then they would be part of the Schengen zone. And Austria, if I'm not mistaken, is not in that either.
Okay. I didn't know about Austria. I didn't remember it anyway. If I had heard it. Yeah. Um.
But
Okay. So yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No. Yeah.
Sorry.
You want me to ask a question? Okay. No, this is because I think the thing right now is people are looking at freaking out both in both parties in the United States and all parties to some extent in Europe that this bond between the United States and Europe might be broken because it's not in the United States financial, or let's call it economic interest. I think it is. I think I
It
can
is.
make a good case for why it is. And you could too, no doubt. Uh, Probably even better better than I can, but being on the inside of NATO. But I think that the appearance of disunity in front of the Russians, when the foot is on the Russians' throat, is very surprising. It's almost as if claiming a victory before you've actually the clock has run out, right?
Yep. Yep.
So how hysterical are I mean, you said people in Europe are worried, but how hysterical are they? Are they not hysterical?
They're not
This is a
hysterical.
big moment, but it's a big moment. Can Europe pull its trousers up and manage all this? I don't think the United States is going away. I think the United States is going to stay there. I think if President Trump continues on this line, that the Republicans will lose in the midterm elections if he continues with the uh, disunifying, the deunifying, is it deunifying policies with the EU, with NATO, um, with the tariffs, these sort of what so many people see as disruptive tariffs. We'll have to see whether they are or not, and what the right level of a tariff is, and the right trade balance. But between the two entities. But definitely people are worried about the disunity in front of the Russians right now. How does it look to you from where you sit in Europe and in NATO, in the NATO structure?
People are concerned. They're not worried. They're concerned of how he's using his power and tariffs in order to influence certain aspects of the industrial might and also other just the economic impacts that he's having. That's what they're worried about. The only thing that we see here that is he's doing for the favor of Europe is he's making sure that the industries get back and the countries are doing what they're supposed to be doing. There are very, 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 very few countries that are meeting their GDP promises. And what I mean by that is a 2% of the GDP. It's not. It is very, how's it called? It is very exasperated as though the disparity is massive. Because look at the U.S. The U.S. is 2% that they're putting in, probably equals the exact amount that most of the countries combined together in the NATO make. That's because it has a massive GDP. So, and then you take
You're saying it's 50-50 US and versus the other countries in NATO.
negative. It's not even 50-50. It's more exasperated, like around the 62 to 68% of the NATO budget is coming from the US. Yes.
Okay. All right.
And then the rest of the countries are contributing with their small 2.2% GDP, which is one of the reasons why he's pushing that. But at the same time, it is like that because they are the ones that wanted NATO since the beginning. And NATO is there to protect those countries that can't. And he needs to understand that he cannot run this like a business. He has to step away from that.
Well, there are a lot of benefits. That's what we were talking about earlier. There are a great deal of benefits that have accrued to the United States since the beginning of NATO, have been protecting trade routes and businesses in Europe and using that as a base for trade throughout the world for American corporations. This is a huge boon to the United States.
Yes, but it's also
it's not manageable. It's not it's not evident from the per country contribution to NATO.
no, yeah. For instance, let's just take a look. True, but just take a look at countries that are there that are under NATO that are tiny. For instance, Belgium. Yeah. They have no industrial might like the United States does, and hell, they can't even make their 2% because they have been so comfortably living in the past, just living with what they have had because they've had a guaranteed protection from the United States. They have cut down on their social. I mean, they've increased the social protection in the military.
Okay, so what is the Swedish-Finnish model, for example?
Protect your country, prepare for war, hope for the best. That is exactly what it is. Okay,
but they have traditionally been exactly the kind of countries that you're talking about with low populations, although Sweden's about 10 million, but Finland's much smaller, a few million. And they have changed. They still have the social programs, but they're spending a lot on military. How's that working out? How are they doing that? And is that a model for these other small countries?
Absolutely, because what they do is that they have a mandatory service for every single person in their country to serve in the military. It is called conscript. Okay. It's conscript. They have that for that reason because they want every single citizen, if they need to muster their citizens to protect their country from, let's just, for instance, call it what it is, a spade, Russia. Let's just say Russia decides to invade, they will muster every single one of their citizens to protect their countries. Germany is even thinking about doing the same thing again. But again, social norms have changed and they do not think about that much often. People are now scared crapless because that's where they have to invest over 890 billion euros to reignite the industrial military power that they used to be. So
it's still going to create wealth. It's going to create jobs. It's going to create manufacturing. It's going to stimulate the economy in many cases, but it just means you may not have as much disposable income for consumer goods or Starbucks coffee. But
here's the thing that people have to understand: do they much rather have the freedoms to be able to walk around without the fear of invasion, or would they much rather be in the fear of invasion and having the luxuries and comforts that they seek and have now?
That's exactly my point. We have to become, we have to develop some kind of martial mentality in order to defend independence. And that always requires commitment. There is, what do they say? There is no, I forget the saying right now, but certainly you must be vigilant, if not daily, weekly, certainly, to protect freedom. You can't just take your life off and not think about what the structure is that allows you to enjoy the freedom. Okay? And that structure changes and those demands change.
Exactly. And you just hit the nail on the head. The problem that you see, for instance, Germany, people have finally seen the light. But you take for Germany, for instance, I love our neighbors to death. Yeah, granted, they've had their fair shares of starting 2 world wars. Neither here nor there. They have decreased their military by 83% over the past 20 years because they have relied and solely depended on military defense from the United States. And now they're reaping what they have sown. Because now they see that the United States is no longer going to probably be there to help them out. I'm not saying that they won't be there, but they cannot be there because they will probably have another theater that they need to worry about. That is what I'm saying.
Yeah, go ahead. People think of Switzerland as being a country that really takes care of its citizens, and yet the underpinning is extremely conservative. This is the oldest democracy in Europe by actual practicing democracy by quite a lot, even if it's not necessarily constitutional. But it was, and there everyone has their weapon, serial number given to them by the government, and has been trained, as we're talking about these other countries are doing now, to come to the defense of their country. They can blow up the roads. They can, do all kinds of things to seal off Switzerland, making it very, very difficult to take the country. You could destroy it with nuclear strikes, but you couldn't take it. And no one wants to destroy Switzerland because they have the one thing they do have. It's not Bitcoin, it's gold reserves and computers full of people's money, right? Yep. So this is a double protection for Switzerland. But even though, so people think, oh, this is a very socially minded country, perhaps the perfect model. And yet they're very aware of how vulnerable they are. And they defend that. They're ready to defend that to the man and woman, rather like Israel, I would say. It's very similar to me, if I may say, to the system in Israel where everybody serves, right?
Yep.
And everybody has weapons at home, right? In that sense.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not common to see a lady walking down in an Israeli street with a AR-15 strapped to her shoulder or onto her back, literally. It's not uncommon to see that there.
Yeah, and they still have a lot of fun and they're very engaged in life, but they're also ready to fight for that life. This is an awareness that people need to do. And America is no good. The shame really is that so many people have guns, but they don't have training and they don't understand the responsibility, right?
Oh, it's in your world. Are you conscription in the United States?
What?
Are you proposing conscription in the United States?
Conscription? Well, I think that you could do two kinds of things. You could make it very attractive for people to want to serve properly in the military. You can make it much more attractive than it is, and I think that'd be a good thing. But also you could require civilian service. There's lots of people in this country who are going hungry. There's lots of people, elderly people who need help. You could have a civilian corps. This was rather something that John F. Kennedy was championing, and it was very popular. It was called the Vista Corps. It was the same or similar to some of the overseas volunteer organizations. But the Vista Corps was working with people who were poor, who were left out, who needed help, particularly children, elderly, and neighborhoods that needed better teachers, that kind of thing. A lot of volunteer work. Vista was called. Very interesting program that did not survive into the 70s or through the 70s, and in any way like it was meant to. But I think these kind of programs tie people more to the ordinary everyday. Right now, everybody's interested in pursuing fame and get-rich-quick schemes. Oh, that's, but that's empty. I was just watching an interview. It's finally very empty, or else all rich people would be extremely happy. Certainly, it can make your day better in many ways to have money, of course. It's very difficult to do anything if you're hungry. And you don't have transportation and those kind of basic things. But I was watching the Beatles talking on a clip just before it just came up, one of those shorts. They were asking him, how does it feel to be so rich? Has it changed you dramatically? He said, well, it does in the beginning, but then you realize you have the same problems. You're still the same person. You still have the same problems and challenges. You just have a lot more things, and then those things tend to take up your time. You got the houses, then you have to look after them. If you have people looking after them, you have to look after the people, and it restricts your freedom even more. So I thought that was really interesting. That was George Harrison saying that, but sitting next to John Lennon with John Lennon nodding and going, yeah, makes sense to me, bro. My brother, yeah. So the point that you made, which I think is excellent, is that we need to be aware of the price you need to pay for liberty. And it's a great price. It's the best price. But it requires unity in the society. Without that unity in the society, when you cannot pursue liberty as a proper goal. When you pit people against each other, both through the media and politics, when you pit them against each other, not in fair competition, but in bitterness. Fair competition, or as fair as you can make it, is great. But and as a motivator. But the bitterness that is so that we see so often portrayed in the media and in politics, and getting more and more intense, even more and more intense as we have better and better lives. I mean, we all live better than kings did 100 years ago in terms of comfort. In the winter, for example, right?
Yeah.
We have heat. In the summer, we have air conditioning. Even, tenements have air conditioning. So, kings didn't have that. And they didn't have, bug spray and things like that. They were attacked by mosquitoes. They get yellow fever or something, They get a disease. And not to mention all the vaccines that have helped us. So life for us, on the basic level for everyone, is huge improvement. And yet we have the psychological challenges to acknowledge that and to realize that the only reason we have those comforts is because we pursued liberty, right? As Orwell said in Animal Farm, the problem with communism or any kind of totalitarianism, right or left, is that the phrase was some animals are more equal than others. All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Anyway, that's just to pick up on what you were saying. I think it's important to remember that. I went on too long, but let's go back to something practical. I'm reading headlines that say that Trump is pissed at Putin, which I've been predicting for some time. You probably have been too, because Putin doesn't want this agreement.
He wants everything. He wants the old USSR back, and all the Baltics, Poland, all the old Soviet bloc countries below Poland have been telling him that he does not want peace. He wants everything what it used to be right after World War II. He wants that. Yeah. He will stop at nothing, and he will.
What's he got to lose?
Nothing. He has nothing to lose, unless during this time frame, Russia becomes so weak because of its inability to conquer that China seeks to destroy and conquer Siberia, which is most of its mineral and oil based, and minerals and
China's got. I'm going to suggest this to you: if the U.S. put, and for sure they're thinking about these things in the United States and in NATO and in the EU and the Five Eyes countries. If you put too much pressure on Russia and China, they collapse. If you put a lot of pressure on Russia, then China can make its move, and China doesn't survive without the United States. It just doesn't travel well. It can't really go anywhere else besides Siberia or maybe South Korea, Vietnam. That's about all they can do is what's on their doorstep. I don't even think their Navy's worth very much, but I could be proved wrong.
I wouldn't put it past their Navy just recently. They've already started to build aircraft carriers that are nuclear capable. Yes, everybody's talking that they're diesel. Yeah, that's their old versions. But these new ones are going to be nuclear powered, and that's going to expand their nuclear.
How many? How
they're
many?
Planning for 3.
The United States has 16,
15.
17?
15.
15. And there are probably ones, they're drawing up the plans in Hampton Roads that we don't even know about.
No.
No? Or yes?
No, they're drawing up plans that we don't know about. I'm agreeing with you, I guess.
In the Hampton Roads, baby. That's where, when you go by there, you'll always see a handful of aircraft carriers. Same in San Diego, etc. Yeah, you drive by and there they are. One after the other. More aircraft carriers just sitting there in one place than there are, in the rest of the big countries combined. How about that? These are things that people don't, I think that people don't realize unless they're in the military. They just don't think about the awesome power of the United States, both economically and militarily, and how we need to use that, not in an isolationist way, but in a way to stop these aggressive countries trying to break things up. But you made a great point about Siberia. Would you like to expand on that and what that might look like?
Yes. So what I mean by Siberia and why they might break off from Russia, well, let's just say Russia's only about, the true Russia is 10 to 15% of Russia combined. The rest of it is Siberia. Russia can't control Siberia. It's too big of regions outside of Russia proper to handle, to even grow the infrastructure. They can't even properly manage Russia proper infrastructure, period. So as you can see, there's only one railway that really works well, and that goes to Vladivostok. That is the furthest.
Trans-Siberian Railway. Yeah.
Roger that. And the road infrastructures that they have to, they're piss poor maintained. Most of the roads that they see are either crumbling or they're heavily destroyed or have just reverted back to dirt roads. Because dirt roads are a lot easier to maintain than a proper asphalt road. And the Trans-Siberian rail line is the only means of transportation via land, which is much easier to move equipment back and forth via land than it is by air. Air is much more expensive and vitally crucial, but Russia doesn't have good aviation. I wouldn't say.
Avionics.
I wouldn't. Thank you.
You're going to say avionics?
Avionics and aerospace get
Aerospace
like cargo. Yes. So that's the reason why Siberia is not as good as it should be. And they don't want to. And Siberia is not to mention the terrain, the weather. They're at the northernmost point of Russia. It's so brutally cold that infrastructure has to be top notch, or else their people will freeze. And they only have certain cities, certain regional cities, that are going to be able to withstand that. And even that is at best, because it's still failing. And they make it seem like as if it works. It doesn't. There are people that are suffering through that minus 75 temperatures Fahrenheit. Of course, that's minus 45 or 44, 45 Celsius. It is the coldest place on Earth, and coldest places on Earth. But anyways, I digress.
But also during the summer, when that stuff when it melts and it gets hot, and for a couple of 3 months, they have massive mosquito attacks and come and carry it away. And it's so remote. Remember that huge explosion, many megatons, that happened over 100 years ago out there, where they're still not sure if it was a meteor or what it was.
Oh yeah, that they don't even know what the hell that is, and that's not.
It's so remote that they don't even know. It barely registered that thing.
Yes.
In the outside world.
That's huge. It's massive. Russia is the biggest country, and they can't even put. There are places there that have minerals and resources that would make that country an absolute powerhouse, but they don't have the infrastructure to go there and get it, or they refuse to invest in that because they're so stuck in their ways, the Marxist ways that they've had for decades. Soviet ways. I would say it's more Marxist than Soviet.
100 years. 100 years, anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, it's decades long. 100 years.
It's been 100 years since Lenin died.
Yeah. And then the Marxist movement was the one thing that caused Lenin. But anyways, regardless of that, China sees blood in the water because the Siberian regions want to break away. There has been so much restlessness and upheaval and unrest on those regions. They know that they're even having a hard time controlling them right now as we speak, and they keep it quiet. They want to, because if they get more popularity, more media coverage, they're going to separate. And China knows that, and they are waiting.
Yeah, because if China has no oil of its own to speak of or gas, and if they can get that region, I mean, this is the most natural thing in the world for them, is it not?
Yes, it is.
To want to occupy that region as far and remote as it is from the Caucasian Russia,
Oh,
right?
yeah, you're spot on again, because look at the
I
fact of
mean,
the
by
matter.
Caucasian
So,
Russia, I mean the Caucasus. I mean west of the Caucasus Mountains.
yeah, it's people need to stop thinking of Caucasian, because the Caucasian mountains is what we cause it. That's why they call it Caucasus Mountains, because they relate people to that region that are most common. So that's why the hand's Caucasian. But
Yeah,
the Caucasus from the east onward it's hard, it's remote, it's very, very difficult to even get to there. The power
yeah,
infrastructure is there. It's ridiculously poor. But China, they'll throw money at it, and they're good at it. Some of their infrastructure may not be good, but it will work for a certain amount of time, and they can build on and go off and so forth and that. Latin America has a lot of influence from Chinese. Oh yes, Latin America is massively influenced by China, and people don't think that Latin America is influenced by China. I just took a trip to Costa Rica recently to visit my family, and they have so much Chinese infrastructure there that it's ridiculous. They think that just because they're partnered with the United States, that they're not going to be vested interest in other countries that are going to help them, when they're going to give them a lot more than what the United States provides. Yes, there are competing powers in Latin America. That's why, do you think that those Siberian regions will not be more willing to take money from China, which is a lot stronger than the Russian currency? Yeah, absolutely, they'll take it, especially to bring in infrastructure. They're just waiting for Russia to fall, and they'll pick up the pieces, especially in the regions that they don't have any control over.
you remind me of Peter Zan, who's. But on the other hand, he's saying, yeah, that's possible, but also China is extremely weak right now.
Oh
Peter
yeah,
Zion, I think people say is pronounce his
yep.
name. I don't know him. I'd love to speak to him. Um, okay. I want to say this. Did you know that I was living in Nicaragua for most of 2 years?
Yeah, you told me that. I remember
Did
that.
I ever tell you that? It was just right next door, your northern neighbor, Costa Rica. I had a wonderful trip around Costa Rica driving. It was phenomenal. Went to that famous park, nature preserve on the west coast, where people surf, and they have jaguars in the jungle there, and tons of howler monkeys and all
Oh
kinds
God.
of crazy stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful. Oh my goodness.
yeah.
Perfect waves too. Not too big, not too small. Perfect waves for surfing.
Oh
Tons of
yeah, but
surfers.
sun, that sun is such a burn. Oh my gosh, it will literally, if you're not careful.
No, you gotta wear a hat. I wore a hat, long sleeves, everything, because
Yeah, yeah.
it's
Smarter than I am.
intense.
I didn't want that.
It's so intense down there. Yeah, yeah. But I really love my time down there. I think it's a beautiful part of the world. But maybe we'll talk about Latin American politics and
Ooh,
well,
I could
Latin
speak to you
American
about that for
history,
days.
because I think we could have an interesting discussion on that one.
Absolutely.
Apart from our European experience, which is extensive in both cases, and unusual that both of us have been. I mean, you were serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I was there too. So yeah, so we've
Ironically
always had,
enough,
huh?
different ways of our ironically, our paths are crossing in different ways, and we didn't even know it.
Well, I think that's why we get along so well, is we have a lot of common experience, and it's a sort of under, it's kind of a thing that's there, even if it's not talked about, right?
Yeah, right,
Uh,
right.
takes one to know one, sort of thing. Yeah. Um, but not that I know anything about cybernetics or cybersecurity. Um, anyway, to so what I read, not like you, um, in any way, shape, or form. The So Trump, after saying that the biggest malefactor in the possible peace treaty was Ukraine's leader, Zelensky, is now up against Trump, who wants no part of this. But wasn't that easily predictable? If you
Yes.
really think about it, I mean, even while you're playing a round of golf, you might think about what this guy is like. I mean, I knew from the beginning, it makes a lot of sense. You want to get a quick deal if you can, and people forget that you said that anyway, or they, get used to it not working. But you want to, if you can get that quick deal, then you get a Nobel Peace Prize or something like that. Or anyway, you go down in history as a big peacemaker. But politically, even if it just only holds for a while, you can say, well, I tried, right? I tried. And he can still say that. The president can still say, well, I tried, didn't work. Because Vlad, like Bill O'Reilly says on the cover of his book, is evil. He's one of the pictures on the front of the new Bill O'Reilly book about evil rulers in history. And he has a lot of access to Trump, so they don't agree on Putin at all. Or maybe Trump secretly does really not like Putin. Who knows? It's diplomacy at a different level, isn't it? In a different manner.
Is it?
I don't know. You tell me. What are your thoughts? I'm just trying to get us shake things up a little bit here.
In 1984, do you remember between 84 and 86? He had a lot of visits to Russia.
He took a lot of visits to Russia. Yeah.
Yes.
So you think this could be a Manchurian Candidate thing?
Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I just don't feel that he has non-interest in Russia.
Well, he did. He reportedly did some deals with Russia. I'm not. I couldn't tell you details of those, or even the broad scope of those. I just haven't read about it. But people who are reasonably coherent have said that he had a lot of dealings in Russia. Okay, so assume he did. But he's got, I think the worrying thing to me is there are a lot of people around him who are trumpeting Russia, right? And I think one of the most important people in his ear is Tucker Carlson, who really seems to be, take it or leave abroad, I like the United States, which is fine, but I do too. And a lot of people don't like the United States these days. I've heard a lot of people say they don't like it. I don't understand why. It's still great. But Europe's great too, for different reasons. It's an odd thing when Europe is saying to the United States, we politically care more about your archenemy than you do.
That is interesting.
Yeah. Okay, that's where we got to that point. We got to by just throwing it out there. We got to that sentence. That is a mind blower. I never thought I'd see that. The Sovietologists never thought they'd see that, right? But what President Trump is going to find out right now, I don't call him Trump, Mr. Trump, President Trump. He is the president. What he is finding out now is that Putin is not about to give up what he has to make him look good. He wants to use Trump to make Putin look good.
Yes.
And that's the Russian modus operandi in everything they do. It's very twisted. Remember all those British spies who were so well trained in the arts and literature and had gone to the greatest universities, and they went over to the Russians. They went over to the Soviet way, and when they ended up really seeing what it was like, even with all the honors in the world, the Soviet Union was
crap.
A horrible place to live. I mean, a horrible place to live if you love liberty and you have any kind of ambition to operate off your own talents without interference. Because, I mean, you can ask people from any of the satellite countries, they are much happier. I mean, it's 90%. I mean, you still got small percentage who long for the good old days of penury, poverty, and oppression. But most people, the great overwhelming majority, just love the fact that they have liberty. Look at Ukrainians. They voted with their feet, didn't they? A lot of them. And a lot of them have voted with their lives and going in the opposite direction. So is it now time for the United States to learn something from Europe again?
I think so.
Because Europe's been learning from the United States for a long time. Don't fight each other.
True, but let me expand on that, because I think that the United States can learn from Europe, because you don't turn your backs to your allies.
That is the operative statement. Yeah. You stick
United
with
States,
the. Yeah. Go ahead. You go.
no, I was just going to say that the United States have made many mistakes in decades, and they have started to garner a reputation of making allies not trust them because of their actions. I think that the United States needs to learn from Europe, and actions will speak louder than words, and that's what they're trying to do. And Europe is not even doing anything. They're just doing what they know what to do. Yeah, granted, they bicker and squabble, and they are concerned about their economic interest and how it's going to affect their people. Yeah, because they really do genuinely give a damn about their people. Not to say that the United States doesn't, but they don't turn their back to their allies, period. It's like when you make a promise, they keep it. And they, no matter what, they keep it. They've learned from what happened in World War I and World War II. That is over almost 100 years ago. And they've
So
learned.
no fear. Yes. No. It's 80 years. Yeah. The end of the war, Second War. Over 100 years since the end of the other one. But so German rearmament doesn't trouble your sleep.
No, I actually encourage it. I encourage it, because if the United States is not going to honor their commitments, like they didn't honor the commitment to Ukraine when they signed the Budapest Agreement in 1994, stating that they needed to protect Ukraine if its sovereignty is infringed. Well, it was infringed 3 times, and all 3 of those times nothing was done, and that protection was full military response with boots on the ground. People want to read that accord, go ahead and read it. Count my words. You can bring me to wherever the heck you want to read it. It is written clear as day in the Budapest Accord.
Yeah, and people forget the arguments the Russians are making is for agreements were made with the Soviet Union, a country that no longer exists and didn't exist after 1991. So the contracts with that company or state were null and void. Not to mention the nuclear weapons that Ukraine, which was the thing that they gave up. That was the point for the Russians. Yeah, and that was the main thing the Russians wanted, and they really carefully skirt around that one. That was a huge giveaway by Ukraine, and the fact that they did that means that they deserve all protection. In my book, means they deserve all protection and all support against the Russians, because the Russians were not supposed to encroach again and not take Crimea even. Don't tell me that Catherine the Great took it, so it's okay. It's not.
No, it's not. It's a sovereign.
Changed so many times.
Sovereign piece of Ukraine. It is still the same thing. That's why I cannot stand that. Though the one thing that people need to understand, and the United States, my fellow Americans, need to understand, that NATO is there as a deterrent against wolves like this. Because the wolves can put sheep's clothing and don it and pretend to be your friend, and then unzip it and attack you for everything you have. If
the
we
little
do
green
not take
men.
care of each other. Exactly.
The little green men. Oh, we're not invading. Well, who are all these guys that we don't know? What are they doing here? If you're not invading, who are these people who speak Russian? If they're not invading, incredible, really. But you know, the Slavic world can be a turgid place it has a very a very mysterious origin and a mysterious history, if you think about it. The languages are almost impenetrable to people who don't really study them, as you and I have, but or academics do. So this is a very hermetic place. If you don't start fashioning some keys to unlock its secrets, right?
Yes. If you don't understand its history, it's gonna bite you pretty hard if you don't.
Let's leave it there. Thank you, Anthony. We've been talking for an hour and 10 minutes. Pretty good.
Oh man,
And
it's like
let's quit while we're ahead. You go have a beer, and I'm gonna finish my breakfast.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's right. It is over there. All right, good sir. Enjoy your
I'm
breakfast. Pleasure.
I started it, and then it was time for us to talk, and I was so excited I couldn't finish my breakfast, but I'm going to do it now. It's good talking to you, brother. You be good. Talk to you very soon, and keep things rolling over there in NATO, huh?
Will do, brother.